Good afternoon. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all from near and far for joining us. And if you were observing the screen before I started talking, you saw much more interesting things than I'll be able to say from alums and acquaintances of Jack Caughey, who was such instrumentally important in so many of the careers of our alums and even our faculty for a couple of decades. And I'm delighted that we have the opportunity to celebrate the establishment and inaugural appointment of the John L. Caughey Jr. MD Professorship in medical education and the appointment of Dr. Logio as the inaugural chairholder. And I want to call out Pam Davis for her involvement in getting this initiated and taking charge, so that all I had to do was sign off on it when I took over as dean. Really thank Dr. Davis for that astute awareness of how important this professorship would be. And I have learned, as she knew, visiting alums around the country, that any alum from the 50s to the mid-70s mentioned the importance of Jack Caughey in their career. And in fact, I had the experience just this weekend of meeting with an alum in San Francisco who said, "I don't know why the guy took me. I was an English major." So we are glad that he has done as well as he has and that Jack had the insight. So, of course, our endowed professorships honor our most extraordinary faculty, and certainly Dr. Logio is one as a leader in medicine, medical education, medical school administration. And you're going to hear more about Dr. Logio in a few minutes, but I will note that after Pam had signed off on the recruitment, and it was just as we were turning over deanships, we thought it was important, although COVID was just happening. I happened to be visiting my children in Philadelphia, and Leah and I met at a bar. We were having a cup of coffee, but a bar was the only place where we could find that had an outside space. Don't worry, people weren't drinking beer. And Leah said to me, this was her dream job, and I hope it has and continues to be. I just hope you don't have recurrent dreams about it. But you'll hear more about Dr. Logio from Dr. Lena Maida in a few minutes. So for those of us who don't always come to investitures, I'll remind you that the purpose of our professorships is to really honor and support our best and brightest faculty and the contributions that they make. They're incredibly important for us maintaining our talent and our competencies, and we obviously can't do it without many, many committed friends and donors. It's hard to imagine just what it means to establish a professorship in medical education of this nature. It will outlast all of us, as has the original professorship on record, which was established by King Henry VIII in 1540. The Regius Chair of Civil Law at Oxford University, the oldest in the U.S., is Harvard's Hollis Professorship in Mathematics and Natural Philosophy when they were combined entities, established in 1721. Then in the Divinity School, it's now part of the Department of Physics. I guess that's still a philosophical area. And it's now held by a woman, Karen King, professor of physics there. For the School of Medicine, our oldest professorships are linked to the Hanna family. The Leonard C. Hanna Professorship, established in 1901 from a gift of Howard Melville Hanna. Many of you in town know of the Hanna real estate group. And that chair is currently held by Ann Harris in the Department of Genetics. The next professorship was 1906, Hannah Payne Professorship in Experimental Medicine, and that is now currently open given the passing of Nate Berger, who held it for many decades. And the third is the Hannah Wilson Payne Professorship that's now held by Agata Exner. Now you'll notice that I've mentioned a lot of women, and I'm delighted to say that 38% of our endowed professorships are now held by women. Not quite up to 50%, but we're getting there. The professorship we celebrate today, as you can see and know, is in honor of Jack Caughey and his legacy. He passed away in 2001, as you can see. Was Dean Emeritus of Student Affairs and Professor Emeritus in the School of Medicine, an innovator in education and compassionate patient care. He didn't really think of himself as the admissions committee person and then push him off and let him have a good time. He was involved in their education throughout their careers here. He received his undergraduate degree at Harvard College in 1925 in history, so he knew how to identify liberal arts majors, and his Harvard degree in medicine in 1930. Now that's 5 years, so I think he must have also taken a gap year, by the way. And that was, as you also can imagine, just the beginning of the Depression. He was intern resident at Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center between 1930 and 1937, and then also received a doctorate in medical science at Columbia University along the way in 1935. He was then an instructor and associate in medicine at Columbia until 1945, took some time off during World War II to serve in the Office of Research and Development on the Committee of Medical Education as a technical aide. And he came to know during that activity Joe Wern, who at that point was a professor, ultimately then became dean of the School of Medicine. And as dean, he then recruited Dr. Caughey to serve as the first assistant dean of students and to be active in the admissions process. Working together, Jack Caughey with Joe Wern and then Hale Ham, I might remind many of you that he was also a hematologist, so that's good. And developed the Ham test. I can tell you what that is later, or even show you one if you want. I bet not many people know what a Ham test is, and I hope some of us do. So anyway, so it was just at that time where this powerhouse of Caughey, Wern, Ham rethought medical education, an incredibly profound era. Remember, this is just 1952 to 1955. And they came up with the Western Reserve curriculum, which was a method of teaching around organs and blocks, not semesters of education. And that became recognized around the country and was revolutionary at the time. It's certainly how I was taught, and I suspect many of the rest of us were taught in the 70s and 80s. And that helped us as a medical school then recognize that we too wanted to innovate further, and that led to in the late 1990s, our new curriculum, which is still called blocks, but now is taught in small groups with a problem-based learning approach. Again, that's taking off across the country. So I'm delighted that we get to recognize both Jack for his incredible appreciation of what it takes to be a physician and how to select a class, his involvement with medical education, and what must have been just a profound appreciation and a perspective on just how do you educate around being a physician, let alone learning the material. But the impact that he's had across the country, to be honest with you, is remarkably profound in terms of what he did for our medical students as well as their graduation and their career management. So I was going to mention a number of the comments that were brought out, which I will do briefly, but many of them were on the screen beforehand, so I don't want to totally belabor it, but certainly being a bent arrow, being non-traditional students, having a variety of backgrounds, he understood that a passion for learning medicine and medical care was critical. He was known as Cactus Jack. I actually don't know how that name came about, but I'm sure family does. Remarkably unpretentious, I'm told, humble, I'm told, took an open mind and engaged with students, often admitted them on the spot. Sometimes it took a week or two, but he imprinted his perspective on every student, I think, that went through that. So that helped us establish a Center for Integration in Science and Medical Care in the late 1990s that became the backbone for this now endowed professorship and allowed a lot of innovation to take place along the way. A few comments. My late husband, this is from Leah Stern, Dean Wiley and I were chosen to be students in the medical school by Jack Caughey. Dean Wiley, that's his first name, was from Southern Ohio, and I came from Case from Los Angeles. We were an unlikely couple, but individually, Jack saw something in us. It turned out we were the only couple in the class, and we were married for 21 years. He taught us the joy of caring for patients and the art of compassion. In fact, our entire experience at the school reflected that approach. I'm sorry I lost my dear husband. This is from Leah 20 years ago. But had Jack Caughey not serendipitously chosen two strangers for the class, my life would not have been the same. Ray Pong, class of 75, said Cactus Jack was the biggest hero and inspiration during my years at CWRU. He taught us about people, life, the importance of being true to oneself, the essence of the core of medicine. And I always have kept it on my mind, and I'm forever grateful. And one more from Rebecca Barkus, class of 75, said she was so inspired by the concept of an endowed professorship that she remembers the word from Jack, endowed chairs are what make good universities become great universities. And if I were to comment on our president of the university, that great cities require a great university. So I think I've said enough for the moment, and I'm going to let John and grandson Tom come up and say a few words. Please join us.
I actually don't know where Cactus Jack came from, but my dad liked to vacation in the West, so I think it might have had something to do with his fondness for going out fly fishing in Montana and things like that. So my family and I truly appreciate the honor being bestowed on my father, Dr. John L. Caughey, Jr., by naming this professorship after him. He didn't like a lot of fuss. He was very unpretentious, and he probably even would have objected to this ceremony. But secretly, he would have enjoyed the honor because his whole life was devoted to education. And I'm also very pleased, my family's very pleased, that the first holder of this professorship is Dr. Leah Logio. I've had this pleasure of speaking with her, and I know she will be excellent. And she obviously cares a great deal about education of medical students. We look forward to hearing more about and from her shortly. But now I'll say a little more about my dad. Given his career, naming this professorship in honor of my father seems particularly fitting. As some of you know, my dad was awarded the Flexner Medal for his contributions to medical education. And like the dean was saying, after World War II, he and his colleagues Joe Wern and Hale Ham made influential radical changes to medical education through what they called the new curriculum even then. They established this new curriculum here at Western Reserve, and it was very influential. My dad was also well known, and I would say even famous, for his talent in seeing the potential in medical school applicants, including unconventional applicants, his so-called bent arrow admissions. But I know one of his greatest contributions as an educator was his ability as a one-on-one teacher, as an individual mentor. My father had a wonderful capacity not only to recognize, but to bring out the talents of medical students and other young people. One of the great things about being his son was all the meaningful conversations we shared. We had great fun together, taking hikes, fishing, splitting firewood, and watching sports. And part of the pleasure for me was that I usually learned something new and interesting. If my dad was a little disappointed that I chose to become a cultural anthropologist rather than a physician, he never showed it. We had many nice conversations about anthropology, and he actually helped me a lot as a writer and teacher. He knew how to listen carefully, step back from an issue, and then view it in a fresh, creative, yet very practical way. Like some of you, I fondly remember my father as one of my absolute most important teachers. This professorship is a beautiful way to honor him for that legacy. On a lighter note, as an anthropologist, I was initially amused to find out how much prestige, what we anthropologists call borrowed status, I had from being my father's son. When I found myself in a hospital or doctor's office, I may be asked, "Are you related to Jack Caughey?" And when I say yes, my status goes way up. On this basis, one doctor I'd known for about 2 minutes invited me to stay at his ranch out west anytime you want. But I now realize that this borrowed status is another sign of the deep gratitude so many of my father's students have had for him. As a doctor, yes. As somebody who admitted them, yes. But more as an important teacher. In a parallel way, I was at an anthropology conference some time ago, and an anthropologist I did not know came up to me and asked if I was related, not to Jack Caughey, but to Tom Caughey, my physician's son. I was a little surprised, but I admitted that this was the case. Yes, I said, Tom is my son. Once again, my status rose. She said, he saved my life. And then she went on to rave about what a caring doctor Tom is. I know my father would have loved this story. To know that his physician grandson is the kind of caring doctor he so appreciated. The kind of doctor so many of my father's students became. And this is a wonderful part of his legacy. So to add just a few more remarks, here is Dr. Jack Caughey's grandson, Dr. Thomas D. Caughey. Thank you.
Well, it's really a true honor to be here. Thank you for having me. Just a chance for us to think back to my grandfather's legacy here and to see how some of his values will go on in the investiture of this professorship and in Dr. Logio as the first professor. So I wanted to try to think back maybe of a few of the things that Grandpa Jack taught me. He often taught more by example And to me, it was sort of, not a transmission in an easy way to describe, but it was, a set of values that came through by discussions we had, by examples he gave. He was always, again, as has been said, somebody who really loved to be curious about things, but to focus on simplicity. So I'll try to keep my remarks sort of to some simple themes. I think there's really three things that if I had to ask, what were some of the important things that he taught me? One of the values, I think, was at the heart of education, the just such importance of curiosity about so many things. I mean, that's the heart of what education is about. If we say, what are we trying to do? How do we allow students to have that, follow their curiosity and to really understand what it is they're studying, and in this case, biomedical science, but also the humanistic aspects of that. So I think that, that simplicity and curiosity are just two of the really core values that were so important to him as an educator. And it was curiosity also about the person, the curiosity that led him to love being the dean of admissions, to find out about these students and what makes them tick and who of them would be the kind of doctor he would want, to have admitted and to graduate from the school here. So I think that curiosity was also transmitted as how do we really care about a patient, as we really have to be curious about their story. Another aspect that's been touched on already a little bit is this sort of practicality. I mean, he really believed in the importance of real-world experience. This idea of why he really liked admitting bent arrows was often because he found that having some time, having had a gap year, having had some time to do something else, maybe having studied a different field, brought a much broader perspective, allowed people to think about medicine in a more humanistic way, maybe, again, studying other disciplines, he himself being a historian, history in a broadest sense, as well as history of the patient, and how do we bring together the diverse disciplines. Being a physician is such a critical balance of the biomedical science and the rigor behind that. If we go back to even Flexner, the award that he got was named after Flexner, who, did a survey of medical schools in the 1910s that, did not have scientific rigor. So the pendulum had swung to really, extreme rigor in terms of, thinking about how do we approach biomedical science. And sometimes, he saw the real importance of humanism and didn't want that to get lost, and this practical approach. So like has been said again, as a physician myself, so many times I got to meet people who were students that had been admitted by him over the years, and they would come up to me, see my name, and ask if we were related, and tell a story about how, if it wasn't for him, they would likely not have been admitted to medical school. And time again, when I got to meet some of these physicians, especially early on in my career, I find that these were some of the best loved physicians by their patients, by their colleagues, people who really the doctor's doctor. And so that sense of how do we identify people who have that practical real-world experience. And then the last theme is more one of bringing together, of integration. I mean, he really, again, believed how do we bring together these diverse disciplines that are so important, the humanism aspect, the science aspect. There's a funny thing that a lot of us who are practicing clinicians will recognize when a physician who's in a field that may not have as much patient contact, let's say a radiologist or pathologist who doesn't have the chance to actually interview the patient, but has to interpret some data that has to do with that. A lot of times there'll be a phrase in that report that may say, clinical correlation advised. He wanted to train physicians who could do that really hard work of clinical correlation. How do we take an unusual finding and relate it to that patient and make a diagnosis and figure out how to treat that patient and hopefully lead towards some healing of that patient based on that finding. That's what clinical correlation and integration is. So those are just a few of the themes that kind of came across to me in my times with him and conversations with him, and led me to try to live up to some of those things. Again, it was often just a little bit intimidating to meet some of his former students and know that, I was related to him and I kind of had something to live up to in a way. And so it's definitely guided me in terms of, the person I've tried to become, the type of physician I've tried to become, and it's been a great inspiration in that sense. And so, again, thank you for having us here to be able to share just a little bit of that. And it's really such an honor and such an important chance to think about him and know that his values are being transmitted through this. So again, congratulations to Dr. Logio. And I think it'll be a great chance to allow, the guidance, the inspiration, the next generation of medical students, generations to come, that will hopefully be able to become the kind of doctors that we need to meet the challenges in medicine today and to live out some of those values. So thanks again.
Well, I think we've had two incredibly inspirational comments from John and Thomas, hard acts to follow, and I think Jack Caughey himself is a hard act to follow. And I will comment on Tom. Anytime I get to share a stage with a hematologist, it's a better day, so thank you. I'd like to move on now to have Lena Mehta join us to introduce Dr. Logio. Let me tell you a little bit about Lena Mehta, who is, in fact, our Associate Dean for Admissions of the School of Medicine, and carrying on in the tradition of Dr. Caughey and making sure that we have an amazingly both spectacular, humanistic, and diverse class. And she works tirelessly in that regard and keeps the rest of us on target. She's held that position for now a decade and is, in her spare time, professor of radiology here at University Hospitals. She's also the immediate past chair person for the National Committee on Admissions, the 5-member advisory board for the procedures and policies that we use across the country of all medical schools through the American Association of Medical Colleges. She maintains her practice in nuclear radiology and PET, or positron emission tomography, and she's both written and lectured extensively in that area, and handles, as chairperson for radiology, the risk management and quality for university hospitals, and is a member of the radiology board of directors, and is important in that department's quality and compensation, promotion, and tenure criteria. She's also one of the first people our medical student incoming class meets, as always puts aside time with applicants for special questions and comments that they may have. And she certainly helps the connectivity of the first-year class. Whenever I'm introducing the first-year class at their first day and I mention her name, they erupt. So with that, Dr. Mehta will tell us about Dr. Logio.
Thanks, Dr. Gerson. So yes, I am Jack Caughey 3.0. He is a tough act to follow. Just today, very serendipitously, I spoke to his family. I received a letter that was addressed to him posthumously to my office, a member of the class of 1977, talking about what a difference he made in her life. And I thought that was a remarkable coincidence with what we're having happen today. So tough act to follow. While admissions does look very different today, in 2024, many of the philosophies that he held are still alive and well in the way in which we recruit our classes. So following in his footsteps, it's always evident to me that progress and innovation, the themes that really benchmarked his tenure at our school, and his great love for medical education is something that we don't witness all the time, but we definitely see in our honoree, Dr. Leah Logio. It's with great pleasure and great honor that I have the opportunity to share a few thoughts about Dr. Logio with you today. Dr. Logio is a Renaissance physician, an educator, and a scholar. As I was preparing these comments, I looked at her CV, and it took me a long time because it's really, really long with lots in it, and it's very star-studded. But in the interest of time, I will try to summarize. She received her BA and MD from the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, A board-certified internist, she completed her residency at Duke University Medical Center and stayed on faculty there for a few years. Her talents then took her to Indiana University School of Medicine, where she held many different leadership roles there, including program director of the internal medicine residency, vice chief of education, co-director of the internal medicine neurology combined residency, and assistant dean in the Office of Faculty Affairs and Professional Development. Her talents then took her east to Weill Cornell Medical College, where she held many key leadership roles there as well, serving as vice chair for education in the Department of Medicine, program director of the internal medicine residency, director of the Leadership in Academic Medicine, the LAMP program, chief of the Division of Education and Faculty Development in the Department of Medicine, and associate dean of faculty development. She then moved to Drexel University College of Medicine, where she served as the June F. Klinghoffer Distinguished Professor and Chair in the Department of Medicine. The list of honors and awards that she received during all of those years is really long. It began in medical school with the Saul Goldman Award in Geriatrics. At Duke, she received the Haskell Schiff Award for Excellence Clinical Medicine and was an Engel Society faculty inductee. She was awarded the Outstanding Clinician Educator Award from the Society of General Internal Medicine, was inducted as a Master of the American College of Physicians, and was named a Fellow of the Royal College of Physicians. Dr. Logio has authored and co-authored many peer-reviewed publications and is a prolific and well-known speaker. It was our good fortune at Case Western Reserve School of Medicine to land Dr. Logio as the Vice Dean for Medical Education. She arrived in July of 2020, that period of time known as the pandemic, when things were either shut down or remote, and building new relationships and establishing new footholds, let alone making progress, was extremely challenging. But having known Dr. Logio for several years now, it is no surprise at all that she not only overcame those challenges, but she managed to grow and further strengthen our medical education enterprise. She is passionate about progress. She is fearless in facing challenges. She's a great relationship builder, and she has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen. Try and keep up. In the few years that she's been here, she has increased the depth and breadth of support for our medical students, expanded and further innovated our Mount Sinai Skills and Simulation Center, brought our Masters of Anesthesia program under the umbrella of MedEd, bolstered our Physician Assistant program, and expanded our Pathway program offerings, just to name a few of the things that she's done. And now she's leading us through our LCME accreditation review, which is a huge undertaking, but I think it's obvious to all of us that we are in good hands. For all of Dr. Logio's stunning academic, educational, and professional contributions and accomplishments, much would be lost if I did not round this introduction out without talking about Dr. Logio as the Renaissance person. If you've not had the pleasure of hearing her play the piano, have not received a book recommendation from her, met her lovely family or her good boy, DJ, the doggy, if you've not tasted one of her famed lemon knots, but if you have some, be careful because my husband will fight you for them because they're that good. Or if you've not yet been the recipient of her wise and compassionate counsel, then I suggest you introduce yourself to her during the reception, because she is somebody that you want to know. It's truly an honor for me to have the opportunity to introduce Dr. Logio to you, and I now invite her to the podium to tell you a little bit about herself.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm going to take you, I was asked to take you on a short journey of my career so you know a little bit more about me, although I feel like you know a lot about me. I mean, lemon knots were already mentioned, so it's hard to know what to say. The beginning is that I come from a large Italian family. My family is full of family and fun and food. Almost all the pictures on my phone are food. These are my parents. My mom passed away about 15 years ago. But by the numbers, we were 5 kids, but the house always had about 10 kids in the house because we always had a guest. We had 7 pets over the course of our growing up: 3 dogs, 1 cat, 1 parrot, 1 very large rabbit, and 1 snake that got lost one time. Those are other stories. And I moved 9 times before I started college, so I learned to be fairly adaptable. This is the family with the 5 kids, and you could probably pick me out in the checkered shirt. And then these are my siblings having fun and being goofy at a family wedding some time ago. In the middle, I did go to Hopkins for both college and medical school. I was in Durham, North Carolina, at Duke for some time. I spent a short time at Hackensack, New Jersey. Then I was in Indiana, New York, Philadelphia, and now Cleveland. I have 2 degrees. I've had 12 leadership titles in the course of my time. More patients than I can count, although I would love to know how many actually. More residents than I can count, and again, I'd love to know how many actually, and more students than I can count. And honestly, it's these 3 last categories that have imprinted me the most in my journey. This is me in a newsletter at Duke Hospital many years ago. I think I've changed a little bit, but maybe not as much as maybe I should have. And then you create your own crew. The picture of my husband and I is during the total eclipse here in Cleveland. It was intentional because neither of us like photographs, and so we did that on purpose. And then these are my 3 beautiful children being superheroes, and they are superheroes. My in-laws, who are now both passed away, and my kids grown up, and DJ, the Wonder Corgi that Lena already mentioned, who most people know because in the beginning of COVID, when we were doing everything by Zoom, the couch behind my desk was a perfect way for him to Zoom bomb me on a regular basis, and he really enjoyed the reactions he got out of people when they saw him come up over the back of the couch. It really does take a village to grow a doctor, and it takes a village to have a career. And these are some of the people in my village. All the women in my family are in this corner. Some very dear friends that I have had along the way. This bottom left corner are the sisters of the Carmelite monastery who live 2 doors down from me and have become like family to me. They actually love my dog and keep treats in their kitchen just for him. So during COVID, when I was somewhat isolated, my husband, an infectious disease doctor, was in the hospital all the time, and I was an empty nester with kids out in college. Between the nuns and my dog, I was kept sane. Along the way, there's been thousands and thousands of people. These 2 people served as program directors with me. They're mentees, if you will. This bottom right picture is all of the residents who were orphaned when Hahnemann went bankrupt when I was the chair of medicine at Drexel. This is a group of faculty development, a faculty that I helped mentor during a faculty development program, and just other groups of residents and chief residents and mentees and mentors along the way. And this is really what it's about. And I think it resonates with who Jack Caughey was. He was very relationship-centered, and to me, my career is about these people and these relationships and these people and these relationships. My academic highlights, the Residency Review Committee of Internal Medicine, which is an ACGME RRC for internal medicine, did a 10-year experiment to say, well, could we change the way we accredit programs? Let's let programs who've had good track records experiment. And so we got released from all the rules and we could be experimental. It was called the Education Innovations Project. There were 20 such programs across the country, and we were one at Indiana University. The focus for our EIP is worth mentioning because it really gets to the heart of who I am, which is that every patient deserves the best care every time. And for me, the focus of the way we were going to change the way we trained internal medicine residents was to make sure every time they were putting patients first, every time we were making sure patients were safe, and we were teaching residents how to lead change to make healthcare better. It was through the EIP program that I actually became part of a national group, a learning community, and I got to meet a lot of people and write a lot of papers and present in front of the Institute of Medicine and other very distinguished things. I even gave grand rounds at NIH, and as a general internist who does medical education, I never saw that one coming. Another highlight was that I have had a track record of innovation. When I was at Weill Cornell as the residency program director, a lot of changes were happening around work hours, and those of you in the residency space know what I'm talking about. And I realized that if we really wanted everyone to get high quality education, we might have to do it differently. And so we created a digital ecosystem, and we gave 20 faculty iPads. I gave them 6 weeks. We did some training for a half a day, and I said, build something. Let's see what you can do in 6 weeks. And if you do it well, we'll give iPads to the residents, and everything will be on the iPad. And it's amazing what you do when you release people to try new things. And we got a lot done by creating all of the conferences on all the articles, everything that was happening in the residency program on the iPads. I've done a lot of work also in the duty hours conversations. I got to be one of the people who testified to the ACGME when they were reconsidering the work hours. Competency-based medical education has been a very important journey for most of us in medical education for the last 10 or 20 years, and that includes some parts of milestones. I was the president of the Association of Program Directors in Internal Medicine, which was another platform for really large conversations about what were we doing right and how do we do more of that, and what could we do better and how would we do that. I think some of my infamy is around being the chair of the largest clinical department when Hahnemann went bankrupt. There's a New Yorker article out there. If you want to look it up, it'll share some of the great story, the death of Hahnemann Hospital. And I will tell you, this was another highlight in the lessons it taught me, because things change on a dime. And you need to be ready to change with them and think about them and take a step back and understand what you can and what you can't do in the setting of all the information or sometimes none of the information. And it really is a life lesson for me. It was a life lesson for me. My Case Western Reserve University chapter so far, and in some efforts, links to Dr. Caughey. As Lena mentioned, I arrived in July 1st of 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. My first step into the HEC, it was set up as Hope Hospital with copper tubing all over the place. 3 months later, it was set up for the presidential debates. So it's been quite a journey. I serve as the Vice Dean over all the clinical programs, which includes 3 tracks that lead to a medical degree, our PA program, and a network of MSA programs that lead to certified anesthesiology assistants. I will tell you the first 18 months were COVID, and more COVID. There was a lot going on. It helped me figure out what could happen and what couldn't happen and how fast or slow things happened. But we did a good job. We kept the trains on time. Everyone graduated when they were supposed to. It was a huge team effort, but it was a lot of problem solving where there were no real answers, if you really want to know. Some of the areas that I have contributed to improve the student experience, we actually expanded our societies, our academic societies, adding a 6th society. We have done a lot of work in the Sim Center, including creating the largest immersive learning suite in North America right now until Baylor finishes theirs, and theirs will be a little bigger than ours. We've actually worked really hard to bring something back that Dr. Caughey started, which was assigning every first-year student a pregnant patient with the hope and dream that the student would join the pregnant woman at doctor's appointments, at the delivery of the baby, and then pediatric appointments subsequently. The birth rate in Cleveland is unfortunately shrinking, so the program sunsetted several years before my arrival here. But we have started a pilot program using senior citizens as wise guiders and mentors to our students to really understand the healthcare system and understand how complex that is for senior citizens. So it's, again, an early clinical exposure for our students to really get them to wear their white coat and feel like a doctor and talk to patients, building those relationships. We've done some other good things, including putting EPIC in our curriculum, so students are very well versed in the electronic health record before they hit the true clinical work. We have learning specialists to support our students in their learning activities. And the Center for Medical Education is now grown to have monthly grand rounds on medical education to support faculty and faculty development programs nationally, and to support other research activities in medical education. We did expand our co-curricular pathways programs. These are volunteer selected options for students who are interested. Since I've been here, we've added an advocacy and public health pathway that came out of COVID and the realization that so many of our students wanted to do more and needed some skill sets to do that. We now have an addiction medicine pathway and a climate and health pathway, and one near and dear to my heart is the medical education scholars pathway, to really help some of our students understand medical education, what it's about, and how to have a career in it. Some other work I've done here is around diversity and belonging. I came in after George Floyd's murder, and there was a lot of conversation with students around the diversity and belonging conversation. I think Jack Caughey had a gift to really understand how to help people feel like they belonged here when they doubted and had imposter syndrome and didn't think they did. And so really trying to focus on that and make sure we are a respectful and inclusive environment is a very important part of the work that I've done. And I've also worked very hard on this professional identity formation. It's always struck me as quite a transformation for a first-year student who is a college graduate plus or minus a few gap years to come into medical school, and then they walk out with a medical degree and they're a doctor. And there's a lot that happens in that journey of 4 or 5 years, and we really want them to be understanding their values and their sort of personal mission statement so they can hang on to that. It does take a village here. This is an org chart. I realized I don't have very good up-to-date pictures of all of our team. Our team keeps changing a little bit, but we have a huge team of people in med ed, and I have a huge team of people I work with in the dean's office too, and it really does take a village. So here's to my village, and we have a lot of fun. We care a lot about what we do, and it takes a lot of us to put our thinking caps on to make it happen. I'll finish by just saying it's really an honor and a privilege to hold the Jack Caughey Professorship. I spend a lot of time with our development people and meet a lot of our alumni, and every time they learn that I'm the Jack Caughey Professor, I get status upgrade, and I get a story or two about Jack Caughey and what he did for them, and how what he really did is he told them they could, and they could, and they did. So I hope to live up to his legacy by really having the right intuition of what it takes and instilling in other people that there is good to be done and to do the good work. That I will focus on relationship as it matters to teaching and learning, because it's in that relationship that people are inspired and try to do more and try to do better. And of course, very well known for lots of innovations, including getting a huge grant. I watched 3 videos of Jack Caughey on YouTube this weekend because I wanted to feel like I could know him. And he talked about the history of what they did with the Western Reserve 1 curriculum. We are now in the Western Reserve 2 curriculum. But I realized how unafraid he was to try new things and to really think outside the box. Stan will be happy to learn that they did actually get a pretty big grant from the Commonwealth of New York to fund the Western Reserve 1 curriculum. So I have it in my head now that we have to look for some funding to do some of the things we want to do. But he was way ahead of his time in terms of a creative approach to education and to relationships and to really making the core and heart of what we do as physicians and caring about that at the very forefront of what he did. And I hope I can live up to that. Thank you.
So it is, in fact, my honor to have Dr. Logio sit in the Jack, I guess I should call it John L. Caughey Jr. MD Professorship chair. And I'll just suggest to Leah that to really live up to the legacy when the day is tough, just look at the back of your chair and remind you of whence it comes. I think we've been inspired by this entire afternoon. I certainly have been. I hope you all have been. It is such an honor and a privilege for the dean to be here to make the presentation. But it's really all about Jack and now Leah, so congratulations. I'm going to encourage all of us to head on out. We have a nice reception outside. Please stay with us and kibitz with us. Thank you.